Hello, artists. So, in previous lessons, we've talked a little bit about how to get started on a landscape. So, I'm going to ask you a review question here, a couple of review questions. The first one is, what kind of perspective do we use when we can't use straight lines and vanishing points? So, the kind where we do use straight lines and vanishing points, where we drew the buildings, was called linear perspective because we use lines. So, 1 point and 2 point perspective are examples of linear perspective. What kind of perspective do we use when we want to draw a landscape? If you said atmospheric perspective, you are correct. So the next question is, what strategies can we use to achieve atmospheric perspectives? And why would we want to use it anyway? So you might need some clues. Take a look at this photograph. You can look at some of my little doodles here in my sketchbook. Why would we use atmospheric perspective? And what are some of those tricks that we can use as artists to achieve atmospheric perspective? All right, so the why is because we want to create the illusion of depth. We want to make things look like they're going back into space, even though the paper's flat. Some strategies are overlapping, so objects in the front will overlap objects that are behind them. Objects will get smaller as they get further away. As they get further away, they will also get less vibrant or bright or warm. They will become less detailed. We'll use cooler colors. They get higher on the page. They may fade or dull. So you can see all of that happening in these examples I gave you. A lot more cool colors back here, warm colors here. Lots of detail. I can see blades of grass, details on the flowers. And then back here, I can see really no detail. There's a little bit of warmth coming through here on this kind of warmish green. It's getting darker as it goes back. These mountains are likely not just gigantic rocks. They probably have a lot of foliage and stuff like that growing on them, but we can't see that because they're so far away. Some other things that you could think about. So again, things getting smaller as they go. So these are all little trees that I put back here. The tree is probably not the same size as the bug. That tells me the bug is closer, the trees are really far away. Overlapping, so I can see this tree is in front of this tree and this one because it overlaps. They get smaller as they go back. Okay? And the details get more sparse as well. All right, so here's something for you to do in your sketchbook. Pull out your sketchbook, grab a pencil, and you can have your oil pastels if you want, but mostly just all you need for this is your pencil. Pull out a ruler so you can measure a 2-inch by 3-inch rectangle. And I want you to use the tools that we learned in the last workshop to sketch out this landscape in a 2-inch by 3-inch rectangle. So sketching is not a finished drawing, just remember that. So how are we going to start this drawing? How are we going to start this? This is a lot going on here. And I showed you a really quick and easy way to break that down. So I want you to practice that here, kind of show how you do that. And then label the 3 parts of the landscape. So I told you there was 3 parts that there's some words we could use to describe these 3 kind of components of your landscape. What are those 3 points? So you're going to start your sketch here, and then you're going to label those 3 parts. I'm going to enlarge this so you can see it really well. Pause the video, do your sketch and your labeling. Okay, so let's talk about exactly how that worked. You should have labeled your sketch like you see here. So the background is in the back. The middle ground's in the middle, and the foreground's in the front. So you can remember F for front, foreground. So the way that I know what's what here is that anything that has detail on it, like you can see all these details here, that tells me that all this stuff is in the front. All of this stuff is really close to me. That's how, and I know that because I can see all these details right here on these objects right here, okay? So if I were going to divide this so that I could sketch it, I probably wouldn't put all those little wavy lines. I'd probably just kind of indicate the most important part. So there we go. All right. Then the middle ground is going to have a little less detail. And I'm going to identify this area right here as the middle ground. Really, to be honest with you, not only these overlap, not only is this the middle ground, but honestly, this stuff back here is part of the middle ground as well. Okay, because sometimes it'll overlap, and that's okay. All right, so the next thing is the background. So the background is all this stuff back here. But the most important thing for me to delineate in the background is going to be this mountain because it's a big part of the drawing. All right, so if I'm going to create that on a rectangle, the first thing I'm going to do is probably the horizon line. So we really didn't talk about where's the horizon line in this thing. Remember that the horizon line, it can be a little hard to define. It really is just your eye level. But sometimes it can also be where the sky meets the land. Although the mountain is the land, it's generally considered above the horizon line. If I'm looking at this, my eye level is probably going to be right about here. If I'm standing on the ground and looking straight out, probably going to be right here. And I can see that's about halfway down the page. So if I want to draw this scene, let's just get rid of some of this. All right, if I want to draw this scene, the first thing I'm going to do is figure out, I can transfer my horizon line, and we said it was about midway on this one. It won't always be midway, but on this particular example, I believe it is. And then I can I can transfer my middle ground. So we said the middle ground comes about like this. Well, that kind of straightened it, but let's go back in and kind of, all right. So the middle ground kind of comes through here. That's that tree line that helps me figure out where to place those. And you can see it kind of comes down here a little bit. So it's going to swoop below that horizon line just a bit, but it mostly stays along with it. All right. And then I'm going to put my mountain in the background because that is an important aspect of the drawing. So it's going to kind of come about like that. And then my foreground, it depends on what you got happening in your foreground as to exactly what you would draw on the page. So this is a pretty important aspect of the foreground. So I'm probably going to go ahead and figure out where that goes. And then all the rest of it is really just going to meet that middle ground. So now I've kind of mapped out the different areas of my composition, and I can start going in with my color or value. Probably since we're working with oil pastels, I'm going to start with some value. And I might kind of, I'm just going to pick an area to start. I'm probably going to start with my foreground and some of my middle ground, probably. But I've kind of got the most important elements figured out. I know where the mountain's going. I know where that tree line is going to be because it's going to be right along here because you can see the trees right along here. So I'm really just laying out my composition so that I can get started. All right. So strategies for creating texture in a landscape in oil pastel. So you're going to refer back to those techniques that you practiced last week. Remember that color blends color. All right. You're going to overlap and layer colors to blend them. Remember your rule of threes. So you're going to use multiple colors within the same family. We call those analogous colors. So if you have something that is yellow, you're not just going to come in and color it like in a coloring book with yellow. You're going to use analogous colors to blend it, all right, to give it some form. Remember to saturate the paper with pastel. No scribbling. When I'm saying scribbling, remember what we all used to do when we were in a coloring book like this? Don't do that. We're not doing that anymore. All right. So you're going to cover the paper. So it should be well covered no matter what you're doing, whether you're stippling or scumbling, which kind of can be like scribbling. That's okay. But you're going to be layering and we're not going to see that paper hanging out underneath by the time you're done. Use dark colors sparingly because they'll overtake your composition very quickly, especially black, but not just black. Okay. Use color to create value. So you can see how I use color here in this stippling. I've got 2 yellows, 2 oranges, 2 reds, a purple, and a blue. So there's a lot of color happening in here. The more color you use, the better, pretty much. But definitely avoid using just one color to add color to a particular element of your composition, because that will flatten it super fast. So you're not coloring like a coloring book. You're using color a little bit more intelligently now. You're creating value. So we learned how, like the really darks, they can really take over those colors quickly. But we can use them sparingly to create a sense of value. We might blend in with gray to use some to create some value, or maybe some of the related colors instead to create the value. Remember not to over blend. If I were to take this right here and really scrub it with my finger, it's just going to be a muddy mess, and it's not going to look blended at all. It's just going to, you're not going to like the results. So be careful when you're blending. Go easy. You can always do more, but it's hard to undo something like that.